looks like there is a new box surprise dropping as of right now. So let's start by going over the new cards. First, we have Dark Doom Dread Ruler. Send a zombie monster to the graveyard, and then it becomes a 3500. And then, if we have a level 7, it deals burn damage. So the main thing is that this, like Trigger Drago and Ancient Rise Dragon before it, is able to boost itself up. But this one requires a discard. So I definitely don't see it being used over the other options in aggro piles. Okay, so we have a generic 1500 vanilla. That's fine. This one gives you a 0 attack monster back. So presumably we're getting a 0 attack zombie. And multiple 0 attack zombies. Torso is pretty similar to Seahorse Carrier, except it adds back a bunch of 0 attack monsters. And adding back a 0 attack monster is actually pretty good in the Royal Bubble matchup. Which means the Aqua Engine might be dead. Crawling Torso has more attack than the Seahorse Carrier, and the cards it adds back aren't good attackers, but they are relevant in the current meta. I think not being at limit 2 means the Torso will be more consistent as an advantage engine than the Seahorse Carriers, and it might see some play. I don't know how many of these 0 attack things you would run, but still like a 3-4 split or something. It'll give you something in between the Beast and Aqua engines. I know there are some people who are running like Aquas with Currybot to fill in the extra slots, but I think just running the 3 Crawling Torsos would work as well. Moving on, we do get Escalade outside of the skill, and that is fine. Overall, I don't think this is the card that is going to take Psychics from unplayable to the top of the meta. The Guard only negates direct attacks, so this is here as a counterplay to Hell Tuning Invasion and Doom Metal. Whether or not this is going to be worth it over running something like the King's Majesty engine, which can also protect one of your monsters against other decks, is pretty questionable. Also keep in mind, against other main decks, like Magnum Overlord, they are going to be attacking into your monsters rather than directly. Then we have Thunder Gazelle, who is randomly limit 3. This lets you work somewhat similarly to Piercing Samurai, except it can give anything piercing. However, since this card does require you to have no cards in the opponent's hand, it's going to suffer the same fate as Trigger Drago, so it doesn't actually replace the Piercing Samurai in the deck. Opponents are frequently going to have one card left in hand, especially if they know you are on Thunders. You could see this in generic aggro decks, but you won't because it's limited 3. I think this card is probably dead on arrival. Rogue of Archfiend is essentially a better version of the Royal Bubbles Arena. The only trap card that can destroy monsters is Widespread Ruin, so you can simply send this to the graveyard and then make your best monster immune to the Widespread Ruin. Additionally, unlike the field spell, when you don't need to use the effect, this counts as a low-level monster you are able to use. This is like a reverse Mystic Dealer, but it requires you to have your boss already on field, and this can be a little bit awkward. We already know from Fashion of Faith in the Aqua deck that sometimes you're only going to have the 2 low-level monsters, and if you have to tribute off the Fashion of Faith before you summon the Dion Keto, you aren't getting the advantage, and Future Diviner is pretty similar. And even worse, Future Diviner doesn't actually give you card advantage. If you are a relatively new player, you probably want to just go ahead and stick with the other boxes for now. Then we have Clapping Thunder. If we have 2 or more face-up Thunder monsters, we get to debuff the opponent's monsters. But if we have 3 monsters on the field, we draw a card. This card is not as good for consistency as you might expect. The problem we already have in the Thunder deck is drawing too many level 7 monsters. And that means, now if we're sitting on 2 boss monsters and a Clapping Thunder, we're still only going to be able to bring in 2 monsters and then tribute off for the 1 boss. What Thunders really need is a card like Mystic Dealer that can get a boss out of your hand and then cycle into a new low level. We send a monster to the graveyard, and then we also send Endall to the graveyard. And then we get back Climax Finale and Psychic Introduction. This is terrible. We're giving up 2 monsters for a conditional boost. Overall, my impressions of this box are that it is a little bit weird. We just got a mini box that focused on Thunders and Royal Bubbles, and now we're getting a super mini box that focuses on Thunder and Rebels. It's almost like they had a main box and then decided to just split it up into 2 separate releases. I suppose this is fine, as we did go 3 months without a box, and if they want to give us multiple smaller boxes, that's okay. I think that's probably good for the game. However, it definitely does seem a little bit weird that we're getting exactly the same archetypes in the next box as the previous one. And it's made even weirder by the fact that Royal Rebels are already one of the best decks in the game. And now they're giving them even more support to go with a rerun, which is giving them even more support. I would definitely expect to see a skill or card hit in the very near future. Imagine playing in Dragon Ruler format, and then they announce the next set is even more Dragon Rulers. Okay, restricts you to only Psychic-type monsters, which makes sense, but only the 1400 or more slot. Notably, you'd be able to run Essel in this deck, which is going to put even more cards in the graveyard to help you set up cards like Roman Pick and Climax Finale. And then, if we summon a level 7 monster, we get another card back. This is actually not too different from the already existing Psychic Drive skill. Let's go ahead and compare it to that. Psychic Drive costs 300 life points, but then it gives any of your level 5 or higher monsters a card. And then Prima Katana lets you add a level 2 Psychic Normal, whereas this one, it works with any of the level 7s. So this is probably a little bit better. So the main target is a level 2 is Future Diviner, who has exactly 500 attack. It is a +1, and it works after you summon the level 7 monster. So I mentioned that this card would be a little bit inconsistent like Fashion of Faith. However, with the skill, even if you only have the 2 low monsters, you can use Future Diviner as tribute and then add it right back with the skill, which then enables you to draw a card. I can see that being pretty solid. The issue is Psychics themselves are not that good. Having to pay so many life points to do anything is a huge problem, especially when we are fighting decks like Royal Rebels, which can clear the board and inflict thousands of damage every single turn. Paying your own life points to do anything means you are going to be outpaced massively. Then we have Death Doom Requiem. No requirement, but we can only be running Fiend monsters, except for level 4s, which means once again, this deck has access to Essel, which really surprises me. I feel like Essel leads to the most feel-bad situations in the Royal Rebel decks, so letting them continue to use Essel is a huge shock. Moving on to the actual skill effect, it lets us bring 2 level 7s on the field from our hand, activating Death Doom. So it also turns off the heavy metal, which is really interesting. So they want you to load your deck with all of the level 7 or higher monsters, and then brick by drawing 3 or more high level monsters. And then if you do that, you're able to trigger your monsters for free. And keep in mind, even though Doom Metal does destroy all monsters on the field, it doesn't flip them up. So I think there's a pretty good chance Helltuning Invasion remains the better skill, unless we get a new ban list that nerfs the skill in some way. Finally, we have a Roman skill, which locks us to Fiends and Psychics. By treating a monster as 2 tributes, as long as it's level 5 or higher, Heavy Metal will get its effect, and Prima Katana can come in over a low-level monster for free. I actually really do want to try this skill. I think this is probably the first skill where Very Basist will be a good card. In the past, Very Basist has been incredibly underwhelming. It functionally is just another low-level monster, because you're tributing one off to summon it, and then summoning your low-level back. However, with Roman Advance, Very Basist now counts as 2 tributes for Heavy Metal, and then it will also recycle itself with the low-level monster it revives. Overall, I don't think this is going to be as good as some of the more dedicated Psychic or Fiend skills individually. But if you like both of the characters and want to do a nice hybrid deck, this one seems pretty fun, and it might end up being the best way to play Psychic.